Hi guys, welcome to Bible Breakdown. We are doing Psalms chapter 18. So this Psalms is titled Praise for Deliverance, and then it says, For the choir director of the servant of the Lord David, who spoke the words of this song to the Lord on the day the Lord rescued him from the grasp of all his enemies and from the power of Saul. He said, then after that it goes into the chapter, and there's actually 50 verses in this chapter, and this is the fourth longest psalm. So as I was reading, I was like, this looks very familiar. I've read this somewhere before. I've seen this somewhere before. Some of the verses I believe are in some of the earlier psalms that we already read. I tried to look for the reference, but I don't really know. But I was trying to make a point that this chapter was actually referenced in 2 Samuel chapter 22, and that is labeled David's Song of Thanksgiving. So for this chapter, I kind of wrote general notes because I feel like David was very intentional with what he was trying to say the Lord did for him. So for verses 2 through 19, I wrote that David is giving God thanks because he was providing him with rescue. He uses a lot of imagery, mostly around verse 7 and then going forward. He talks about earthquakes and fires and storms and lightning, and he's comparing all these things to God's power. Then for verses 20 to 27, I wrote that he highlights his righteousness towards the Lord and how he humbles himself before the Lord. And by him, I mean David. In verse 21, he says, For I have kept the ways of the Lord and have not turned from my God to wickedness. Then in verse 24, he says, So the Lord repaid me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his sight. And then from verse 28 to 45, it's like the bulk of this chapter. David, I wrote, he writes ways in which the Lord has helped him in times of trouble. He talks about different things. He says in verse 35, You have given me the shield of your salvation. Your right hand upholds me, and your humility exalts me. He talks about how he pursued his enemies. He talks about how he was free. He says in verse 43. I do love the way that David wrote this because it goes into my next point. For verses 46 to 50, I wrote that David praises the Lord for being the foundation of his life and the reason behind all his success. So as you see what David writes here, he's always giving God praise. And at the end of the day, David shows how without God, he would not be able to do anything that he was successful in, which is very true. And because of this, David writes in verses 49 and 50, Therefore I will give thanks to you among the nations, Lord. I will sing praises about your name. He gives great victories to his king. He shows loyalty to his anointed, to David and his descendants forever. And that really shows the whole meaning of this chapter, which is giving praise for the deliverance that God gave to David. And that is all I have for y'all. I love y'all. God loves y'all more. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Also, I know that I said I was going to do 2 chapters today, but we're only doing 1. Tomorrow I'll do 2 chapters. I promise.